Alright, so today I want to talk about all the info about the RLCS 2025 season and kind of compare it as well to the season prior and even the one before that as well to kind of see in what direction we're going with the esports. Starting off, let's talk about the prize pool. We've got an increase from 4.3 million last season to now 5 million this year for RLCS. So generally speaking, that is a positive, an increased prize pool, better for the esports. So that's cool. What I will say though about that is that now 500k or just under 500k of that prize pool is actually going to 1v1 tournaments, which whilst that's still generally a good thing, the 3v3 events are prize pool wise all combined are going to be practically identical from last season. So it's not like the 3v3 scene has gotten a major improvement, and generally speaking as well for sustainability for the orgs, this 1v1 change, the extra prize pool for RLCS in terms of 1v1 doesn't necessarily matter too much. Now, I understand that some of the players that will be in the 1v1 tournaments and getting far into the tournaments will have a contract with that org. Regarding, how much the pricing and stuff and how much org representation will help the org, I'm not too sure. Also, there's no guarantee of top 1v1 players even being under an org. So I think that whole situation might be slightly tricky. I only mention this because I don't want to act like the whole scene is suddenly, going back up in an upward trajectory when, the money isn't necessarily going into the 3v3 scene. And not that there's a problem with them putting money into 1v1, but let's not act like the 3v3 scene has suddenly, been revived. Oh wow, 700k extra prize pool. That's not quite right. Now, regarding whether they should be putting money into 1v1 when generally the scene has been declining, that's a whole different discussion. To me, when I think about it, I'm kind of okay with it. I don't really mind. But then, with the price pool that they are using in 3-3, they have to use that price pool appropriately, let's say. I thought I'd mention as well that the highest price pool we've ever had for RCS is 6.1 million. So it's not like, we're super far away from that number now. So, that's a positive at least. So then let's dive in a little bit more specifically into the price. But let's look at regional events for, EU and NA from last season compared to this season. And as you can see from the numbers, the price pool has decreased by 10k for regional events, which is not a huge difference. And when you look at the distribution as well, it looks largely identical except for first and second, which is probably not a huge deal. Just because, if you're first or second, you're probably going to go to the majors, and considering there's a decline here in the regionals for prize pool, and there's a small increase in prize pool for the whole of RLCS, maybe you're thinking, where's that money going? Well, it's going to the majors. So if you're getting first and second in the regionals, you're probably going to the major. So is this a huge deal? No. I don't think there's much need for it, to be honest. I don't think there's necessarily a need for the majors to have a massive increase of prize pool. I like the regionals kind of looking like, the teams are getting a decent amount of money, and I feel like redistributing the money more into the majors by just taking a little bit from everyone's, regionally speaking, is more an attempt to make it look like there's a lot of money going into the esports, to be honest with you. But is it a huge deal? I guess not. But maybe this is bias, nostalgia, whatever it is. But I still prefer it from last season where, the regionals still have a decent price pool for first or second, but it's not a huge deal. Kind of a little bit nitpicky, let's say. So let's compare that then to regionals from 2 years ago. And as you can see, the price pool is actually less than what we have this season. But the distribution for the top 16 looks much better. And the reason for that is because now we give prize pool to top 128, not just top 16. So the money is distributed very far down and wide, right? Now I recognize that giving money to top 128 provides many benefits, like enticing a lot of players to sign up because you get money from way lower down in the placements, and it has increased signups, of course. And increased signups is good, but what I will say is that it is sacrificing orgs and the sustainability for orgs, right? We have less orgs now than what we do last year and the year before and the year before that. Generally, it's been a decrease, and then suddenly when you make it less sustainable for the teams, that's not good, and I think that's actually will bring us in a negative trajectory if we continue doing this. Though maybe at some point we can recover from it, and the scene will be less dependent on orgs or something like that. But generally, I think it's a negative trajectory to make the top unsustainable. I don't think magically the esport will have a lot more money flowing through just because of more signups. Maybe eventually that'll come in. That's probably the plan, but I don't see it happening. And we have got to admit as well that right now the esport is not in a great place, and it is definitely in a worse place than what it was not that long ago. Now, I don't mind if you know kind of switch this up. You don't have to have this exact distribution. You could even add prize pool placements for top 32 if you want to lower that as well. But I don't want to change that too much. Top 32 is kind of the lowest that I'd want to go. But I will say that, for example, for first and second, you can reduce that prize pool and actually bring it to the other placements a little bit to kind of spread it more evenly. I think that would be a decent idea just to make it more sustainable, depending on whether the old system from 2 years ago wasn't that sustainable for orgs. That kind of depends on that, but I get the feeling that it would have been a little bit better if we took a little bit away from that 20k and that 30k for first and second, and brought it to the other positions. So, I don't think you have to have this exact distribution either. All right, so let's then compare the majors from 2 years ago, last year, and now. As you can see, we've actually increased the prize pool from even 2 years ago for the majors. So that's pretty cool, right? A lot of money, which is pretty cool. And assuming that we handle the regionals well with the prize pool that we've given it, because I think the prize pool we give for regionals now is fine. That should work. That should function. It should be sustainable. Then this price pool for the majors would be cool. It actually reduces as well the distance between world's price pool and major price pool, and majors happen more often. So it does give you a sense of more sustainability as well. When majors are closing in on worlds, you're not just relying, oh, we gotta make that worlds, and if we don't, maybe we'll be at a loss. Now you're increasing the likelihood that you won't be at a loss, let's say, by having better price pool for majors, even when the esport was doing better. So that's generally good. But I will say that considering how the price distribution does work for the regionals, if we are going to give money to top 128 for regionals, then this comes across as to me as a way to make the esport look like it's more successful than it is. You give the majors high price pool, but then when you look at the regionals, first place doesn't get that much money, and second place, third place, you even go down. Regionals, for the top 16, it doesn't look great. So if we're gonna keep giving money to top 128, then increasing majors price pool to me seems like a weird choice. But yeah, at least generally speaking, the price pool has increased for RLCS, so that's good. All right, let's compare then the prize pools for Worlds 2 years ago, last year, and this year. And as you can see, the prize pool is about the same as last year, so that's cool. I don't mind pretty much an identical prize pool as last year for Worlds. It doesn't, generally speaking, there has been a decline in the esports, so you don't need that 2.1 million prize pool that we had 2 years ago, so that's fine. What I will say though is that it does surprise me that they really wanted to increase the majors for some reason. They really wanted to make the majors seem a lot like very, very important. So it kind of surprises me that, we're only hosting two majors, so they want to make the majors seem really, really important. But then Worlds, they don't want that to stand out that much. Now, it's not a problem. Like that's fine. It just surprises me that they are taking away regional prize pool for that objective. Because it makes the whole scene, generally speaking, less sustainable, and really aims to just have like a set few orgs that are doing well, and maybe it's sustainable for them. But even for the top teams, how sustainable is it exactly? Because you're not always guaranteed to continue to be a top team. And as you know, last season, for top teams, even if you finished first in an EU event, you would then have to qualify through the open qualifier round one next week or whatever, whenever the qualifier was. But they have changed that now. Now, how much have they changed that? They've changed it a little bit. They've made it so that if you finish top 8, you go into top 32 guaranteed. So that's a good thing. But what I will say, and we used to have this as well, this is not a new idea, is I'm surprised we're not doing what we used to do, which is that top 8 goes into guaranteed top 16, and then top 16 goes into guaranteed top 32. For me, that is like the ideal sustainability. If we're going to use an open format like we are, I think that is a good idea to kind of make it more sustainable for orgs and teams in general. But I guess, it is a good step forwards. It just does still surprise me that we're not, um, you know, allowing teams to get a little bit further than top 32. Top 32, it seems a bit random to me. I think they could have easily made it a lot easier. I don't think it requires much money as well to do this whole process, so it seems like an easy change to me. Let me know if I'm wrong, but to me, I feel like it would be pretty easy to do to make that change, but at least it's better than what we had last year, I suppose. Then as well, there's still like last season, there aren't main events. We need to talk about what main event is because on Wikipedia the pages are way too long. Well, you've got top 32 Swiss. I guess that's not main event. I think they said that main event is top 8 technically, which is just ridiculous. Top 16 for main event sounds a lot better to me. Because then you have a decent amount of matches. It seems appropriate. I get that we used to have league play with 8 teams and whatever, and 10 teams later on. But we also had league play for that. There was a lot of matches going on. With top 16, you have a decent amount of matches going on. From top 8 onwards, it's really not that many matches. I don't know. I don't know why they're randomly changing that. I'd prefer it if they were more consistent with what a main event is and stuff like that. And what kind of achievements warrant titles as well? Like, can we just make a top 16 main event? If you're top 16, you get the titles. Can we just keep it simple? You're in RLCS if you're top 16, and then you get the titles. Anyways, that a little bit of a tangent there. And then as well, let's talk about the format of the actual events. So regionally speaking, we've got double elim into top 32, and then top 32 onwards, or just for top 32 section, you've got Swiss to decide who goes into the top 16. So two Swiss groups playing simultaneously. So then for Swiss, they've added a different tiebreaker than game diff to decide who finishes first, for example, between the two teams that finished 3 and 2. So you got a buckles system for that, which kind of is a strength of schedule tiebreaker. So let's say if you beat 3 teams that made the main event, and another team that went 3 and 2, that went 3-0, beat 3 teams that didn't make the main event somehow, then the team that beat the better teams, according to the results, will be the number 1 seed coming from that Swiss group, and then the other team will be the second seed for that Swiss group, for example. Which I think, generally speaking, sounds pretty good. I think there's a level of unfairness in terms of like, if you went against the teams that were ahead of you and you swept all of them, and then at the end you're not given first seed, it seems a little bit harsh. So I think there's positives, I think there's negatives. Generally speaking, I don't really care. I don't think it's a huge deal. I think at worst it might be slightly worse, and at best it's a fair bit better. So I think generally speaking, from what I can tell, it seems like a positive change. Seems cool. Doesn't Not a huge deal, but seems like a minor positive change. All right, so then after Swiss, we've decided our top 16 teams, and then those teams both they go into 2 groups of GSL double elim brackets, which basically means just 2 groups, 8 teams per group, double elim for both of those groups. Except the 2 teams that progress from the upper bracket and the lower bracket will actually play each other for seeding as well. Now, keep in mind, these matches are actually not streamed by RLCS. They will be in team broadcasts, as you'd expect, probably, but they don't get streamed by RLCS. So it's only top 8 that gets streamed by RLCS, which is a negative change. We've got to agree on that. We all want to see top 16, as we all see as the main event being streamed, but unfortunately it is not. So it is what it is. But I will say that if it is not being streamed, then these seeding matches are probably a pretty good idea. If it was being streamed, then I would maybe argue that seeing a seeding match wouldn't be very exciting. But it doesn't really matter, I guess, in this case because, they aren't being streamed. And considering that, I would say that this is a very, very fair top 16 format. It is fairly brutal. People forget that, Swiss is actually quite forgiving. So, you'll see a lot of teams get upset really early in these events. But generally speaking, I quite like this. And then for the playoffs, for the top eight, you got AFL bracket, which I'll show on screen as well, which I think is pretty good. I think it's a very fair system. We used that at Worlds. I think it worked brilliantly. I think the only issue with it is that for the Swiss, you had multiple teams 3-1, so then you had to decide which one goes over the other to be in the upper bracket, and then you had to do a tie-breaking match. This time, with the GSL brackets, we don't have to do that. So this is a very ideal scenario, and I think this is a great playoff bracket, very fair towards the teams. So yeah, I think it's a great format. I gotta say, the regional format, competitively speaking, is very, very fair. So I gotta give them props for that. Then the format for the majors, I believe, will be Swiss into AFL. So then we're gonna have, just like Worlds, we're gonna have the issue where there'll be 3-1 teams where one of the 3-1 teams will be going to the lower bracket of the playoffs, where one of the other 3-1 teams will be going into the upper bracket. So that doesn't really seem fair when it literally got the same series difference as another team. One will be in the lower bracket, one will be in the upper bracket, and the benefits are quite massively different in the AFL bracket as well. So it's a pretty big deal. So I'm actually gonna say that I don't like that format. It's not a huge problem, but I think we could have done with something better. But yeah, not a huge deal, not the end of the world. Now, before I get to Worlds, I should probably explain the last chance qualifiers, because at Worlds we've got 4 extra teams than normal. We're now going to have 20 teams, 4 teams from 4 different regions, 4 different last chance qualifiers. Now, they decide which regions get another spot based on the average performance of these regions at lands, which I don't agree with. For example, the EU region could finish first with one EU team, and then another EU team will finish 1 and 3 in Swiss, and I'd say that happens twice. Then the average of that EU region might end up being better than, let's say, an OCE that had one top eight and one where they went 2 and 3, which would be like top 11, right? In my opinion, the EU shouldn't be getting the extra spot there, considering the worst EU team has gone 1 and 3 twice. That's not as good as top 8 and then 2 and 3. So I will say that I disagree with that ruling. Having LCQs in general, though, I think is pretty cool. I think it's an improvement on last season. So I quite like that idea, but how they're deciding which regions get what spots, then that I don't agree with. And then for Worlds, I think we have a bit of a play-in system where we have the bottom 4 teams throughout the year playing against the 4 LCQ teams to decide who actually gets into that top 16 at Worlds. This I don't. It does seem like it could distract you a little bit in the sense of like when World starts, you don't want to see some play-in bracket at the start. Like when World starts, I kind of just want to watch Worlds personally. But it's not a huge deal. I think generally speaking, I'm being a little bit nitpicky. I think the playing is fine. I don't really have a big issue with it. And I think it's a good way to kind of ensure that the top 16 are actually the 16 best teams in the world, roughly speaking, with decent representations for every region as well. And if you can't beat, let's say, the 5th EU team to qualify for that top 16, then it might be better to have the top 16 at Worlds, not include that team. They still were represented at Worlds. They tried to make it, but unfortunately, if they're just worse than a last chance qualifier team, then maybe them not being in a top 16 is fine. Then the format for top 16 onwards, we got GSL brackets again, just like the regionals. So that's pretty good. Like I said earlier, I quite like the GSL brackets, and I think that makes it all the more important that the top 16 are good teams, because it is such a can be pretty brutal. Let's be honest. If it's a double elim, I think it's quite important that each team at least has a tough matchup, because when you, for example, have to play Limitless, That's kind of a free win. And when you have a tough team, there really aren't any free wins because of how brutal this bracket is. Every series is very, very, very important, unlike in Swiss. So I think this is a pretty fair way to go about it. I will say again, like for the regionals, because this time, obviously, you'd assume the group stage is being streamed. I'm not sure how much I'm a fan of the seeding matches being played. Um, because there really aren't any stakes at that point. Like, sure, you're gonna have an easier matchup probably if you win that one, but I'd kind of prefer if they just seed it based off of the initial seed, I guess. Like, if you're Vitality, you win Major 1, you win Major 2, let's say. I don't think you have to win a seeding match against someone who comes from the other side from the bracket, let's say Dignitas. I don't think you have to win that match to kind of prove you're the upper seed. If you go into this event as the number one seed, you win your two matches in the upper bracket, I think you continue to be the number one seed going to playoffs. That's, in my opinion, I think that's simpler. Not that I hate this. Like I enjoy fair formats, but I think there is a level where you have to say, okay, there need to be stakes on the line as well. There needs to be something on the line, and in those matches, I feel like we're we're lacking that a little bit. Not a huge issue, again, but I would prefer that match not being played. And then after the GSL brackets, we've just got playoffs again, AFL playoffs. So Worlds is very, very similar, like normal regionals. So, like I said earlier, I love this format. So, Worlds format, pretty good. I'll definitely enjoy this. I think the Worlds format is maybe one of, if not the best Worlds format we've had ever for RLCS. So, quite exciting. I'm very, very, very excited for the Worlds format, and I can't wait for it to happen. So, that's probably the biggest positive from this whole video is just some of the formats are actually pretty good. So then one last thing I want to talk about, and I don't want to actually talk about everything that might have changed, like maybe slight seeding rules or even the 1v1. I quite frankly don't care much about the 1v1 part of RLCS this season. I do want to talk about the rules, the regional rules. Are you still allowed to play from Europe, from England, in SSA, on SSA servers to try to compete and represent SSA at majors? Unfortunately, yes, you are. A lot of people tried to suggest the two-thirds rule, but for RLCS, the reason they went from three-thirds, your team has to be three-thirds from your region, to suddenly zero-thirds is because of money, and changing it back to two-thirds would be, pretty much the same money they'd have to spend on checking whether players are actually from their region. So, yeah, if they were trying to save money, then I don't think we were ever gonna go from, to two-thirds, to be honest. I don't think that was ever really on the cards. And personally, I do prefer your full team having to represent your region. Two-thirds is, I'm okay with that. I don't hate it. Um, but yeah, I don't think it was ever really going to happen, to be honest. And unfortunately, it hasn't happened. Three-thirds also hasn't happened. So, APAC and SSA as regions kind of seem pointless now, unfortunately. So that is a continued negative from last season. Anyways, that's gonna be me for the video. It's been probably a bit too long to be honest, but yeah, hope you enjoyed, and if you did, like and subscribe. Let me know some of the changes that that you disagree with on what I said, some of the changes that were made that I didn't mention, maybe some interesting changes that I didn't notice or didn't talk about that you want to in the comments, and I'm happy to talk to you in the comments about those changes. And yeah, I'll see you later.